Hello everyone and welcome back to our channel of Chilling Tales. Today I'm taking you on a journey that I guarantee will make you never want to step into an old hotel ever again, not even for a single night. Because in that place, room 209 is not just an ordinary door, it's a gateway to something that does not belong to this world. There's a hotel located in the heart of downtown Los Angeles, once a resting spot for countless travelers over nearly a century. But among the hundreds of rooms, there is only one that has never truly been cleaned, never truly been empty. Room 209. Today's story takes you back to 2013, the moment when it all began. A quiet night, an unannounced guest, and after exactly 3 hours, she vanished without a trace, as if she had never existed. But that wasn't the only strange thing. Because 1 week later, someone else arrived, also choosing room 209. And 3 hours later, he too disappeared, without leaving a single clue behind. Today's story is not for the faint of heart. If you're in a dark place, a quiet room, you might want to think twice before listening any further. Because as I tell this story, it might just be that the room you're in is listening too. The girl's name was Rachel Mendez. She came from Arizona, an amateur photographer pursuing her passion for capturing old architectural structures. Rachel wasn't the superstitious type. In fact, she even laughed when the manager of the Cecil Hotel, a bald man named Marcus, cautiously asked if she was sure she wanted to stay in room 209. Rachel thought he was just trying to spook her, like cheap hotels often did for atmosphere. But Marcus didn't laugh. His face was stiff like stone, his sunken eyes staring at her as if he had already seen something she had yet to know. Rachel simply smiled and shrugged, saying she was only staying one night, then she'd be gone. It was 8:40 p.m. Room 209 was at the end of the hallway on the second floor, far from the elevator. Rachel clearly remembered the creaking sound of the old door as she unlocked it. A musty smell rushed out from inside, as if the room had been sealed for years. The air was thick and unnaturally cold, like the AC was set to the lowest temperature. Except, the air conditioner had been broken for a long time. Rachel turned on the light, a yellowish glow from an old table lamp spreading over a single bed covered in a faded white sheet. On the left-hand wall hung a crooked hand-drawn painting of a dark forest. The wind outside rustled the curtains, making irregular flapping sounds. Rachel wasn't afraid. She even took out her camera and snapped a few vintage-style photos to post on her blog. At 9 p.m., she sat on the bed and opened her laptop, intending to edit some photos. The screen lit up for less than a minute before going black. Power outage. Rachel stood up and checked the lamp. It was still on. She shrugged, thinking it was just her old laptop. But then she saw something. In the bathroom mirror. The mirror didn't reflect her actual position. When she tilted her head to the left, the image tilted to the right. When she raised her hand to her face, the reflection didn't follow. A chill ran down her spine. She stepped closer, took a deep breath, but as she reached the mirror, the reflection was no longer her. The person in the mirror looked like her, but a different version. Sunken eyes, pale skin, hair tangled as if dragged through mud. And most unsettling of all, that reflection was smiling. Not a warm, understanding smile, but an empty, soulless grin, warped like a shattered mask. Rachel panicked and stumbled backward, tripping over the floor's edge, crashing onto the icy ground. She looked up. The mirror was normal again, just her reflection. Terrified, she quickly packed her things, ready to leave, but when she opened the door, the hallway outside was completely empty. No lights, no sound, no exit. Even the emergency lights were out and the elevator seemed to have vanished. She began running, knocking on doors, calling out, but no one answered. Every door she passed was ice cold and silent, as if abandoned. She ran to the stairwell, but no matter how far she went, she never reached the first floor. The stairs looped endlessly, over and over, until she looked up and saw room 209 again. That was when Rachel realized she was trapped, not just in the room, but in a loop. A snare, a twisted maze, a dimension of some kind, existing within that very room. The last thing she remembered was the whispering sound coming from inside the bed. It wasn't clear whether it was human or something else, like a song played in reverse, soft hissing noises, and then darkness. 3 hours later, when Marcus went to check the room, he knocked on the door of 209. No one answered. He unlocked it with the master key, and the room was empty. No suitcase, no camera, nothing to prove Rachel had ever existed. But the only remaining trace was on the hallway security camera. Rachel entered room 209 at 8:42 p.m. She never came out. Marcus didn't call the police immediately, not because he didn't want to, but because he was too used to disappearances like this. Rachel was the 17th person since 2003. All vanished within 3 hours of entering that room. No one knew why. No one ever came out, and stranger still, none of them left a trace. No belongings, no property, no blood, no sign of struggle. Only one detail was always the same. Whenever the police inspected the room after a disappearance, there was always a mirror with a faint crack in the top right corner, never anywhere else. And always a fresh crack, never matching the previous ones. This time, a young officer named Darren Rooks was sent to inspect the scene. Darren didn't believe in ghosts. He was logical, practical, and believed everything had an answer if you searched hard enough. He stepped into room 209 at 10:15 a.m. with a steady gaze and a chest-mounted camera to record everything. Marcus stood in the hallway, watching with a grim face, like someone who had seen too many ghosts drifting in the wind. Darren opened the door and entered, and for the first time, he felt something logic couldn't explain. The air inside the room felt frozen, heavy, and sticky. The smell of stagnant pond water and rotting wood lingered faintly. He turned on the light. Nothing. When he pointed his flashlight at the wall, the mirror suddenly emitted a faint reflection, even though no direct light hit it. Darren stepped closer, reaching out to touch it. Ice cold, not the usual chill of glass, but the deep cold of ice, like the surface of a black underground lake. He turned around to inspect the bed. Everything was intact. No signs of a struggle, no hair, no strange footprints, nothing to prove Rachel had ever been there. But then he heard a clicking sound, coming from inside the wall. No, not the wall, from inside the mirror. He turned back, and the mirror no longer reflected him. Instead, it showed the hallway behind him, but not the current hallway. A dark, hazy corridor, cloaked in cold smoke and faint shadows drifting silently past. Faceless shadows. Soundless. Shapeless. Just floating presences. Darren stepped back, and his reflection returned to the mirror. But behind him, still in the mirror, one of the shadows stopped, turned, and began to approach him. Darren immediately turned around. Nothing was behind him, but he could feel a cold breath against his neck that made him shiver. He pulled out his phone to record video, but the screen showed only static. The chest camera recorded nothing but a long, droning buzz until he stepped out of the room. And when he reviewed the footage on a laptop at the police station, there was a single frame captured in the clip. Just 1 second. The mirror showed Rachel. Not trapped, but staring out, eyes rolled back, blood dripping from her mouth, and something like a pitch-black hand pulling her away in just one frame. Then, gone. The rest of the video was empty. No one believed Darren. They said the equipment glitched. They said it was a lighting effect. They said Rachel had left the hotel without a trace, like so many young people who choose to abandon the past. But Darren knew that wasn't true. Because 3 days later, while he was asleep at home, the phone rang at 3:12 a.m. No number, no ID. When he answered, on the other end was the sound of wind, then a screeching noise like a mirror being scratched by fingernails. Then a whisper, Rachel's voice or something mimicking it. "I'm still in the mirror, don't let them forget me." Then silence. Darren was no longer himself after that night. He moved out of the city, but every night he dreamed of room 209. He dreamed of walking inside. He dreamed of Rachel standing in the mirror, waving at him. And those dreams lasted exactly 3 hours each time. Marcus couldn't sleep that night. He stood behind the reception desk, staring up at the third floor, where room 209 sat at the end of the left hallway. Even when no one had rented it, the light in the room would flicker, like someone was constantly turning it on and off. Once, in 2011, Marcus himself went up and shut off the entire floor's circuit breaker, only to find that room 209 still glowed as usual. a pale, sickly light, as though something from the afterlife was leaking into reality. Since then, he never set foot in that room again, unless a guest specifically requested it. And even then, he always carried his mother's rosary beads, though he hadn't believed in God since 1987. That fateful year marked the last time someone left room 2009 alive. Her name was Martha Whitcomb, a retired schoolteacher who rented the room for 3 nights while attending her sister's funeral in Los Angeles. On the final night, she screamed, shattered furniture, and burst out of the room with both hands clawed down to the bone. She was immediately admitted to a psychiatric hospital and never regained her sanity. But in her endless delirium, she repeated only one sentence, over and over again. They don't reflect in the mirror because they are the mirror. The mirror is them. She later died of a stroke when she saw her own reflection in the bathroom window. After leaving the police force, Darren decided to return to the Cecil. Not because he wanted to, but because he was being summoned in his sleep. In every dream, Rachel would appear again. She no longer begged, no longer looked afraid. Now her eyes were hollow, as if part of her soul had been worn down, drained, submerged in the terrifying stillness of the mirror. Darren returned to the hotel on a rainy night when all of Los Angeles was experiencing a blackout. In the darkness, the Cecil stood like a black fissure in the heart of the city, a place where light could not enter. He gave no warning, brought nothing with him but a flashlight, a night vision camera, and an old Bible he'd found in the trunk of his former patrol car. Marcus didn't recognize Darren at first, but when their eyes met, the fear in the old receptionist's face surfaced instantly. He tried to stop Darren, but Darren placed his hand on the counter, trembling slightly, but firm. Without a word, Marcus lowered his head and tossed the key to room 209 onto the counter, its golden paint now chipped, rust lining the edges. Darren climbed the rotting wooden stairs, each step groaning like the breath of aging wood burdened by buried secrets. When the door to room 209 creaked open, Darren didn't enter right away. He aimed the flashlight deep into the room and immediately saw the mirror. Still in the same place, still with the crack in the upper right corner, but now it wasn't just an ordinary crack. It was spreading like a web, as if the mirror itself was shedding its skin, fracturing open to reveal a gaping hole. Inside, it didn't reflect the room. It didn't reflect Darren. It showed another hallway, a completely different space. Ancient chandeliers dangled and swayed in a wind that came from nowhere. And at the end of that hallway was Rachel. She stood with her back to him, wearing the white nightgown he had seen in the case file photo. But around her, the darkness was moving. It didn't just cover, it lived, it breathed, and it watched. Darren felt completely hollow. He knew if he stepped inside, he might never return. But if he didn't, he would be drawn back forever. Every sleep, every dream, every accidental glance into a mirror would bring him back to that place. No escape, no salvation, no light. He bit his lip, clenched the rosary beads tightly, and stepped into the room. The door slammed shut behind him. The next part will reveal the truth about the mirror's origin, the inhuman experiments hidden at the Cecil Hotel decades ago, and the reason why room 209 is the rift between the real world and the world of the formless ones. The atmosphere in the room changed immediately as Darren stepped in. The coldness didn't come from the air conditioner or the weather. It felt as though something in the room was silently draining the life out of him. Rachel's face was still turned away, standing in the hallway inside the mirror. But with every step Darren took closer to the mirror, her figure seemed to recede, leading him into a dimension where time stood still and sound was sucked from every corner. Darren touched the surface of the mirror. It was cold, but not the chill of glass. It was soft, almost fluid. And then, without him pushing, the mirror opened like a layer of skin being parted. He was pulled inside, not falling, not sliding, but as if swallowed whole. He found himself standing in the hallway, the same one reflected in the mirror. but all color had been stripped away, everything cloaked in a grim, silvery gray. The picture frames on the wall held no images, just bare emptiness. There were no doors, only windows sealed with dark red curtains like dried blood. And in the center of the hallway stood Rachel. She turned around, but her eyes were no longer human. They were hollow, like two voids piercing into another reality. Her cheeks were pale, lips dry and cracked, but still curled into a smile, not one of joy, but as though forced by some controlling force. She spoke, but her mouth didn't open. The sound echoed in Darren's mind, a voiceless whisper repeating, "You've come, we've been waiting for you." The light bulb overhead flickered. A sound like tightening rope echoed from the end of the hallway. Darren turned his head and saw, not a person, but blurred humanoid figures. Their faces unclear, their gender indeterminate. They emerged from the wall, from the ceiling, from beneath the floor, as if this world was birthing undefined entities. One creature closest to Darren moved. Its hand reached out, long, twitching. Its head tilted as if its neck had snapped, and from its eye sockets were nothing but deep black holes. Rachel remained still, her smile now cracked like a porcelain mask. "They devoured my voice. You'll lose yours too if you don't leave, but to escape, you must bring someone else in." The door behind Darren was gone. The air thickened like mucus crawling into his lungs. Breathing grew difficult. The creatures began crawling toward him, soundless, save for the hissing wind between their teeth. Like whispers, cries, voices calling, all merging into a sound no human ear was meant to hear. In a moment of panic, Darren pulled the Bible from inside his coat. The pages quivered as if electrified. A faint light emanated from the ancient script, making the figures hesitate. Some shadows retreated. But Rachel, she stepped closer, her face contorting as if being pulled from her skull. She pleaded without moving her lips. "If you leave alone, you'll bring them back to the real world. They need you to cross through the mirror." Darren understood. The trap in room 209 was never meant to kill. It was meant to turn them into gateways. Once someone returns to the real world from the other dimension, they become a host. Every survivor becomes a new mirror, carrying the faceless creatures back into reality, silently spreading an ancient hunger, not for blood, but for the human self, the soul. At that moment, the light from the Bible flared its brightest. A crack opened in the hallway wall. There was no time to hesitate. Darren dove through. He woke up on the floor of room 209. It was morning. Marcus pounded on the door, shouting, "Darren! Darren!" and froze when he saw Darren open his eyes. His face turned pale. Darren pulled the Bible from his chest, now just a stack of blank pages. Not a single letter remained. In the mirror, the reflection was no longer his. It was a silver-gray hallway, and at the end of it, Rachel stood silently, looking at him one last time before slowly dissolving into darkness as if she had never existed. Marcus helped Darren out of the room, but from the moment he crossed that threshold, Darren knew a part of him no longer belonged to this world. The hallway air remained the same, silent, dusty, and filled with the musty scent of time. But every movement, every sound, even his own breath, carried the feeling that someone else was sharing his body. As they entered the elevator, Darren glanced at the mirrored wall. His reflection was there, but not in sync. He closed his eyes. His reflection did not. A faint smile flickered across the mirrored face, then vanished. Marcus said nothing, but his eyes were empty, and when Darren asked, "What's happening?" he only replied in a hoarse whisper, "You've seen them now. They won't let go." The elevator stopped at the ground floor, but it wasn't the hotel lobby they stepped into. Instead, it was a large, empty room, its walls covered with mirrors from ceiling to floor. Each mirror showed a different scene. A couple embracing before vanishing, a man standing over a sink then melting into the tiles, a young woman screaming, though the sound was swallowed by the glass, and the one closest to Darren reflected him, but with dozens of different versions, each wearing a uniquely horrified expression. "This isn't the ground floor," Marcus muttered. "It's the space in between. If you took the stairs, you could have escaped, but if you chose the elevator, it chooses for you." Darren clenched his fists, feeling the cold seep into his bones. "I have to go. I can't let them cross over." Marcus turned back, his face melting, wrinkled skin twitching. "You think you're the first? Every person who survived 209 thought that. and then they became the next entry point. When they slept, when they looked into mirrors, when they forgot they had ever been there. Forgetting is the invitation. The mirror door swung open. Darren rushed through without thinking. On the other side was the street in front of the hotel. Sunlight touched his hair, the sound of car horns, people talking, and the smell of gasoline, all of it pulled him out of the trance. But even while standing in the middle of the world, Darren knew he was no longer part of it. He rented a different hotel, far from the Cecil. For the first 3 nights, he didn't look in a mirror, didn't turn on the bathroom light, didn't allow any reflective surfaces in the room. But on the 4th night, in a careless moment, his phone screen lit up, reflected in the glass, not him. Just a silver-gray hallway stretching endlessly, and at the far end, a figure slowly approaching. He threw the phone down, but the screen stayed lit. The figure kept coming. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Rachel, saw Marcus, saw each of the missing people, and they were all whispering the same thing. It's time for you to choose the next one. Darren didn't want to believe. But the headaches began every time he looked into someone's eyes. He saw reflections in their pupils of himself, but a version that was smiling, trembling, and bleeding from the eye sockets. He tried to write everything down, sent emails to journalists, told friends, but every warning was ignored. Even the emails he sent automatically went to spam or were deleted the moment he hit send. It was as if some invisible force was censoring his every move, protecting room 209 from the truth being revealed. On the 14th day after leaving the Cecil, Darren woke up with scratch marks across his chest. In that place, written by fingernails, were the words, "You're running out of time." He understood what it meant. If he didn't choose the next one, he would become a permanent part of that space, like Rachel, like Marcus, like the dozens who once rented room 209 and never returned. And then on a rainy night, Darren went online onto a forum for lovers of the paranormal and told everything. But not as a warning, as a story, thrilling, gripping, chilling, to attract the curious. He cleverly described room 209 as a real supernatural experience for the brave. The post was quickly shared. Someone commented they had once stayed at the Cecil, had heard strange noises from the 2nd floor. Someone asked for the room number. Someone said they would go there just to see for themselves. Darren smiled for the first time in days. He had chosen. And somewhere in that other dimension, the faceless figures were opening their eyes, smiling. Thank you for patiently following along to this point. Now let's continue into the deeper part of the story, the mystery of room 209, the Cecil Hotel. Everything you thought had ended is only just beginning. Aaron shared the post about room 209 on the forum. The Cecil Hotel appeared in local news again. This time, it was about a college student named Toby, who had uploaded a live stream of himself renting room 209 to test his courage. In the nearly 3-hour video, Toby initially chatted cheerfully, commenting on the coldness and eerie atmosphere of the room. He filmed every corner, from the bathroom to the closet, but nothing seemed unusual. Until around minute 154, when the camera suddenly tilted down to the floor. Everything went silent. No more Toby. And then a laugh rang out, but it wasn't clear where it came from. The camera afterward only recorded the image of the room's floor, then abruptly shut off. Since then, no one has seen Toby again. The police only found his phone neatly placed on the bed and his backpack wide open as if it had been ransacked. Room 209 showed no signs of disturbance. The video spread quickly. Some called it an elaborate hoax, but many believed it was real and they started flocking to the Cecil like moths to a flame. Darren followed it all. Each new disappearance felt like a soft note in the symphony of evil he was now a part of. But something began to change. With every person who vanished, he felt himself eroding. Invisible wounds appeared on his body. One morning, when he walked into the bathroom, he saw that his left eye had turned pitch black. No pupil. No light. He went to a doctor, The doctor said nothing was wrong and even assumed he was wearing a contact lens. But Darren knew better than anyone. It was a sign. He no longer had full control over himself. One evening, he found himself standing in a dark hallway, identical to the second floor of the Cecil Hotel. But it wasn't a dream. Reality had cracked. No matter where he was, that room followed him. Every step he took brought him closer to a threshold with no escape. In a rare moment of clarity, Darren went to see a man named Levi, once known as a researcher of dark spaces. Levi lived in seclusion in a decrepit house, surrounded by ancient symbols carved into the walls and books stacked to the ceiling. Darren told him everything. Levi listened in silence until he pulled out a tattered drawing, the original blueprint of the Cecil Hotel. In the center of the blueprint was a red square, unmarked, no number, no door, no entry. Levi pointed to it and whispered, "Room 209 was never supposed to exist." Darren felt like someone had punched him in the chest. "Then, what is all this?" Levi closed the blueprint, his voice lowering as if afraid someone might be listening. "A failed experiment, a wrinkle in reality. There are places that were once temples to darkness. When the hotel was built on that ground, a room that was never meant to be designed appeared. It demands life to continue existing." "And if no one enters?" Darren asked, his voice choked. "It will choose on its own. Every time someone like you walks out without paying the price, it spreads. That crack will find anyone who's heard the story, even just thinking about it." Darren felt the air grow thick. If that was the case, then now, not only was he in danger. Everyone who had read his post, everyone who had shared Toby's video, everyone who had whispered about Room 209 had inadvertently looked into the eyes of something that was never meant to be known. He had to end it. He went back to the Cecil. The hotel was now sealed off by the police after a series of disappearances. But Darren didn't need the front door. He circled around to the emergency exit. His steps led him like instinct, as if his body remembered each brick beneath his feet. The door to room 209 was ajar, not touched by anyone. Inside, there was no furniture, just a thick black void. No floor, no ceiling, a space like a transformed universe. Darren stepped inside. In his hand was the notebook, where he had written everything. Not to warn, but to lock everything away. Each word, each sentence, was a curse against the room itself. As he wrote the final sentence, the space trembled. Images floated around him. Rachel, Marcus, Toby, all of them appeared, like the last fragments of memories from a world that had known the truth. He closed his eyes, whispering, "Don't let anyone else enter. Don't let it find a way out." And then, room 209 vanished, no longer on the blueprint, no longer in anyone's memory, except for the single notebook carefully hidden, where someone someday might accidentally find it and awaken it again. Thank you for coming back. The story of Room 209 at the Cecil Hotel is far from over, and if you think Darren has ended it all, then perhaps you don't understand the true nature of the darkness that room holds. 7 years after Darren entered Room 209 and disappeared, the Cecil Hotel underwent a major renovation. The new owners, a real estate corporation from Hong Kong, wanted to transform it into a historical boutique hotel, catering to tourists looking for a chilling experience. While dismantling an old wall on the second floor, where the corridor once led to room 209, the construction crew discovered a strange void between rooms 207 and 211. There were no blueprints indicating such a space. It had no door leading from the corridor, a sealed room. One of the workers, named Miguel, curiously crawled through a broken piece of brick. He shone his flashlight inside. The light was instantly drawn away as if falling into an abyss. But Miguel stepped inside, as if an invisible force was beckoning him. 5 minutes passed without Miguel returning, and the remaining crew tried to find him. But the void had vanished, as if it had never existed. The bricks had returned to their original place with no sign of being removed. The construction manager paused the work, but the workers began to panic. One claimed to have heard someone calling their name in the middle of the night. Another suffered from sleep paralysis constantly, always dreaming of a room with no door, where voices called them by their real names. The investors dismissed all reports, calling them ridiculous and threatening to fire anyone spreading rumors. But within the crew, a man named Paul secretly documented everything. Every dream, every strange sound, and even images of the hotel's blueprints that he secretly photographed. One night, Paul searched for the email Darren had posted on the forum years ago. The post had been deleted, but through an archive tool, he managed to recover part of the content. It mentioned a notebook, the very one Darren used to seal the room. Paul went to Darren's mother, a frail woman living alone in the suburbs. At first, she refused to see him. But when Paul spoke of the mysterious room, the dreams, her eyes suddenly went blank. "My son tried to warn the world," she whispered, then pulled out an old wooden box from a drawer. Inside was a black notebook, its leather cover peeling, smelling of mildew. "I never dared to open it, but it seems the time has come." Paul took the notebook home, and from the moment he opened the first page, his sleep was never the same again. Images began to infiltrate his mind. Darren standing in the middle of a spiral corridor, Rachel whispering something in his ear, and Toby, his face distorted as if melting, pointing to an empty square on the map and screaming, "Don't let it open." Paul understood the notebook was not just a journal. Every word Darren wrote was a barrier, a protective circle. But over time, they faded. And now, if no one continues writing, Room 209 will revive on its own. He had no choice. Paul returned to the Cecil Hotel, this time not to document, but to write. He went to the second floor, choosing a room next to where Room 209 used to be. He sat on the floor, opened the notebook, and began to write the story with his own blood. The pen no longer wrote ink, but memories that haunted him, the words blurred between blood and tears. Then, in the stillness of the night, the door to Room 209 opened once again, not for Paul, but for the one reading these lines. Do you remember every line Darren wrote? Every image from the video Toby recorded? Every knock on the door in the dead of night on the second floor corridor? Do you think it was all just imagination? Or do you still have the details about that room in your mind? The color of the curtains, the yellowish light, the musty smell? If you still remember, then Room 209 has opened its door for you. Thank you for following this chilling story to the end. If you want to continue the journey with us, exploring mysteries, doors that should never be opened, hit subscribe now. Who knows, the next story might not end here. Can you still hear the knocking? 1, 2, 3.